Hello, everybody. Thank you so much for being here and joining me for part 2 of the Robert Daus, Grace Holland, and Dr. Sarah Sweeney case. I did have to cut this video into 2 parts because it was over 2 hours long. If you haven't seen the first part, I do recommend you watch that one first so you can be fully caught up on this case. Other than that, let's go ahead and dive into the text messages between Robert Daus and Grace Holland. So like I've mentioned, their relationship was very toxic, very tumultuous, very volatile, and it really came from both sides where it seems as if Robert Daus was kind of playing hot and cold with her. One day he would call her baby and say, I love you. The next day he was done with the relationship and going back and forth. Whatever she felt, she didn't end up leaving, obviously. And it's really unfortunate. I really hope that she would have gotten the help that she needed. But some of the text messages I wanted to go over just to give you a view of what the relationship was like. And I wouldn't necessarily say this is behind closed doors, but this is their private conversation and how it's a good glimpse of how they spoke to each other. So this side on over here, this left side, this is Grace, and then this is Robert Daus here on the right. She says, I hope it will be easier in a bigger house. It's your decision, but you have to stop the back and forth. I have a life to live too. And he says, out. She says, that's when you tried to crash the wedding. I love you and I love our baby. He responds, quote, as long as blank isn't going with you, end quote. You wanted to keep blank from running with me this morning on Father's Day. Fuck you. I'm not really sure who this is. I'm guessing because he mentions Father's Day. I'm thinking that he's talking about his son, which is why I think the name is redacted. So I think that he's quoting her saying, as long as your son isn't going with you, you wanted to keep him from running with me this morning on Father's Day. Fuck you. She said, I wanted to go. And he said, it's not your time. And she responds, I was excluded yesterday from coffee. And then he's just fixing time because it was a spelling error. She responds, this morning you said we can go together. And he responds, and that is why my sisters hate you. She says, your sisters are just mean. They don't like anyone. He responds, they sense your level of cuntness. Eye rolling emoji. I'm done with this relationship. Eye rolling emoji. I don't want any of it. She responds, how could you be so sweet yesterday? Are you bipolar? Because sometimes I feel like you are different people. He responds, this morning is a glowing, waving flag. She says, and never know who I'm going to get. I just asked you to delete the comment. It hurt me. I'm sick. He responds, bigger picture. She says, with your baby, part of your family. He says, train wreck, I don't need or want. She says, and they are bullying me on social media. He says, just like the ring. She says, I feel awful. He says, I gave it to you and you stayed. We'll go fix it. She says, no. And he says, and you will feel better. So right here, we find out that he is essentially offering her money to go get an abortion because here, she's saying that she feels sick. She's having morning sickness. And he's saying, I gave it to you and you stayed. We'll go fix it. Meaning if you go and get an abortion, you won't feel sick anymore. He said, going after blank again. Again, I think this is his son. I think there was some type of animosity between Grace and his son, or at least perceived from his end. But if it really happened the way that he's saying that it happened, I can understand how upsetting it would be if you are engaged to somebody and they are not getting along with your child. I can certainly understand how that would create some issues in their relationship. But she seems to be denying it. She says, what? No, I didn't. And he says, and I extended the invitation. She said, I even said, let's get blank for dinner. He says, "It was not your night, you stupid bitch. I brought you." So again, it goes through this for a very, very, very long time. I did go through all of these text messages, and it's the same back and forth where she seems to want to be making this relationship work. She seems to be, if I'm completely honest, almost smothering him. Whereas he continues to say that he wants out of this relationship. He doesn't want her anymore. Now, to her credit, he does kind of go back and forth. Sometimes he says baby. Sometimes they're talking about the new decor and things that they're deciding for their new house and things like that. So I do see the back and forth that she's talking about. But let me tell you guys something. If people treat you like this and call you these names and tell you to leave, I want nothing to do with you, just listen to them, because those are not the words of somebody who loves you and respects you. Clearly. June 22nd, 2020. This looks to be just about a month before Grace purportedly took her own life. He says, "Looks interesting. Are moving your things out to give us space like you said last night?" She responds, "Is that what you want, us to leave?" He said, "You said that you would take the ring, money, and leave so I can figure out my priorities." She said, "If we are done, we are done. No more chances, no more time." He responds, "You said that. You said you would move everything and take it out as long as you could. If we haven't reconciled, then it's done." She said, "Basically, you want to go screw around on me while I'm pregnant. We have until 8 weeks to make a decision about the baby. Marriage license is on July 2nd. There is a timeline." So they're going back and forth, very toxic. He's saying that he no longer wants the baby, doesn't want to get married. He wants to out of the relationship. She keeps saying, basically trying to hold on to the relationship, hold on to him. And it's hard to read. It's really, really hard to read. So one of the other important aspects of these text messages that it seems like Rob has an issue with Grace. He says, "I'm better." She says, "No, what's going on with blank? Is he going to Jen?" Again, I think that's his son. And he responds, "Just because I don't want to live with a pack of children and their unemployed mother doesn't mean I have commitment issues." So at this point in time, again, this is around when COVID started. Things are wild at that time. People are being laid off or not being able to go to work. But he responds saying, "Just because I don't want to live with a pack of children and their unemployed mother doesn't mean I have commitment issues," which is pretty harsh to consider. I mean, they were together for 2 years. They're supposed to be getting married. I think at this point they're together. This is their 4th year together. And for him to speak about her children like that, again, all of these red flags. Not a healthy relationship. They also talked about how when Grace and Robert Daus first got together, he also is, I think it's the vice president of Liberty Arts, and they basically make these memorabilia type things for fallen firefighters and police officers, things like that. And according to the Holland family, he had Grace Holland quit her job to work for him at Liberty Arts, but instead of paying Grace Holland directly, they would have, or he would have him be paid for her work, which I haven't been able to verify the truth behind that. But when we look at the relationship that he has with Sarah Sweeney, there's a lot of similarities there. Furthermore, there's obviously abuse in this relationship, whether it's physical or psychological or a combination of the two. Having somebody taking control of your finances is a huge red flag. Typically, I mean, we see that that's kind of textbook abuse by cutting somebody off from their own financial freedom. right? Where they can't even spend their own money. And it's through these text messages, it seems as if he wanted her to work and have her own money. But then we see these other issues with Sarah Sweeney, and we'll get into it later. But it's very, very interesting. And I don't know if we'll ever have the answers to it, but it's something to keep in mind. Now, I'm going to also go into a lawsuit because as of right now, while I don't know if there's ever a chance of him being charged with any role in the death of Grace Holland, there has been a civil lawsuit filed by Grace Holland's family for a wrongful death lawsuit, essentially claiming that if she did indeed pull the trigger, his abuse and psychological abuse or physical abuse kind of pushed her in that direction. As we go through these text messages, you'll kind of see a little glimpse of that as well. But this is one of the more important areas of the text messages. He says, good luck. She says, because as scared as you may be, you will do the right thing because you are a power player. When things are at the worst, you step up. He responds, there is not doing the right thing. There is not doing the right thing, either a mentally ill person. She says, I don't know what you mean. He responds, you are sick. She says, I know you're struggling, but a doctor can help. Baby, you are the one who is sick. He responds, and suicidal. She says, you've been hurt since Chris and Dave died. Chris and Dave, I can't remember the exact relationship or relation to Robert Daus, but I believe it was like his uncle and his father or something like that, but it is relatives of his. And he responds, and I don't want my child suffering with a mother like you. She says, you keep telling me to kill myself. He responds, 2 weeks. I simply want you to leave. He says, July 2nd, my D-Day. So July 2nd is supposed to be the day that they are going to go get their marriage license. She says, I love you so much. I know we can do this. You will be there. I don't know what that means, but I know you love us and that will overcome any fear you feel. He says, it meant July 2nd is now my Independence Day, free of you. The irony, if I don't show up, then you leave forever. So he's saying that if he doesn't show up to get this marriage license, then maybe that will be the catalyst for her understanding that she wants out. However, again, in that police statement that he provided, he said that they did get a marriage license. So is this all just to torment her? Because if they really did go ahead and get the marriage license, I don't understand why he would if he clearly didn't want to, unless he really wanted just to torment her. She says, baby, take a breath. We got this. I call July 2nd. I will be a no-show. He says, so I have 2 cards to use. Don't show up July 2nd and or schedule termination. After that, shrug. Restraining order? She says, Rob. He says, I want away from you. She says, stop pushing me away. He says, I will get my way. I also want to point out that he continuously talks about her mental illness, which I agree. I think that she has, she definitely struggles with her mental health. But I think that that's an important note because especially considering that he is a fire captain and maybe perhaps we hold these types of people, first responders, to a higher standard. It seems as if you would know not to treat somebody like this who's already suffering from mental health issues. He says that she's suicidal, but yet he continuously pushes her instead of just leaving and leaving her behind. Or he talks about getting a restraining order, but he never does. So in these text messages, he also writes, I gave the ring back. I was gone. I checked out. Again, keep that in mind. I gave the ring back because that's the ring that was apparently at the scene. However, was mysteriously lost, taken. We'll go into his interview about what his explanation was for that. So here he says, all promised when I bought Conway. So Conway is the other house that he purchased while he and Grace were together. The plan seemed as if the plan was for all of them to move into Conway. The house was bigger, so it would be big enough for all four of Grace's daughters and Robert Daus's son. However, he's talking about how he can't afford it. He says, because I can't afford Conway. The utilities are going to skyrocket if everyone is living there. And it seems as if he had some resentments against Grace for not having a job, which she continuously says, I can help. And he says, I don't make enough money. She says, I'll be working at getting $14.70 a month. And he's saying, I will stay at Fairways. But later we find out that he does end up moving into the Conway house without Grace Holland. Again, she was not ever put on the deed of that home. And at the Conway house, that would be the location where Sarah Sweeney would be found deceased. And he says, I can't afford you and your girls. That's realistic. She says, I'm not asking you to pay for them. He says, you broke me. Now, again, I'm not saying that she deserves this type of abuse. I think he is being very cruel to her. He continuously says that he doesn't want to be with her, and that's fine. He doesn't have to be with her, but it still seems as if he is keeping her on the hook almost. Because he continuously makes all of these threats saying that he's going to have her parents come and get her. He's going to file a restraining order. He's not going to show up to get the marriage license, all of these different things, but he never follows through with them. And then just with all of this, it doesn't necessarily make him a murderer, but it certainly paints the possible motive. It's certainly a motive. If he was seriously having this much trouble getting her away, how is that not a motive for murder? Could murder not be the last resort of his to get her out of his life? She says, please do the license. And he responds, when you were trying to kill yourself. She says, you don't want to lose me and the baby. He says, and Nick kicked in 2 of my doors, unless Nick was breaking into my house. She says, Rob, please. He says, which wouldn't be good for his career. I'm sure the police would agree that strangers typically kick in doors for no reason. I bet if asked, Nick would say, why? Stop fucking with me. She responds, what? You were fucking with me. Will you please get the license for me and baby? I called. So this situation here, he talks about her trying to kill herself. This happened, I believe, about 6 weeks before it eventually happened. We do have some recording to corroborate that this really did happen, showing that Grace Holland really was struggling with her mental health. Again, I think it speaks volumes if he knew that she was in this state and he continuously treats her like this. And in my personal opinion, again, I'm not an expert by any means. I'm not a lawyer, but it seems as if that might be pretty good grounds for the wrongful death lawsuit, suggesting that his behavior pushed her into that direction. I even go back and forth with the morality of that. At what point is one person responsible for the actions of another? We saw with that one case, blanking on the name. It was Michelle Carter. She was convicted or charged with involuntary manslaughter after she was basically convincing her boyfriend to go through with taking his own life. Now, the difference in this case is that she was basically talking him into it. And she was found guilty. Now, obviously, different states have different legal standards, but I am curious. I am curious to see at what level Robert Daus can be held accountable for treating her like this. That could have had some, could have played some role in her eventually taking her own life. Again, though, when I think about it, Worst case scenario, if he knew that she was suicidal, that there were other witnesses that she was suicidal, couldn't that be almost a good cover? Like, he knows that he could do this and get away with it, and all of his bases would be covered because of her history. Do you see what I'm saying? Like, if he really wanted to murder her and make it look like a suicide, it would be pretty easy to do. Not saying that that's what happened. This is just me speculating. He is innocent until proven guilty. He has not been charged with any crimes. I'm just saying that if he wanted to, if that was like his last resort, he had had enough, that is certainly a possibility for him to see that, hey, I could probably do this and I would completely get away with it because of this trail that she has left behind. So then Grace says, then why are we doing it? He says, doing what? She says, having a baby. He rolls his eyes. Exactly my thoughts. She responds, so you don't want to? He responds, I'm working. She says, you are so frustrating. Do you? Yes or no? He says, I have no issue having a baby, okay? Please, I'm working. You weren't even supposed to call. So again, he goes back and forth. June 30th, 2020, 6 p.m. They are closed today. I don't really know what he's referring to. He says, I don't know what to do. I do love you. Let's talk some more. She responds, I love you too, but everyone is better without me. You'll find happiness again. Remember the good stuff, which obviously sounds very concerning. He responds, yes. She says, I never meant to ruin your life. I'm sorry. He says, please stop. I'm upset enough. And then at this point, it seems as if Robert Daus is out having drinks. She responds, do you need a ride home? He says, nope. She says, be safe. I love you. He responds, like you care. She says, baby, I do care. Please stop saying I should kill myself. He responds, you asked me and I do not want to marry you and I do not want this baby with you. That was July 1st, 2020. So here she is basically quoting what she is alleging Robert Daus had told her. So according to her, what she's saying is, quote, and again, this is supposed to be in the voice of Robert Daus, quote, baby, there's a 45 in the nightstand. Use it, end quote. And quote, why do you have your phone in your hand? It should be a gun, end quote. She says, that was just this morning. He says, you are delusional. She says, no, I'm not. You said that. You said you want me to die. Don't be like that. It's mean. Again, there's a lot of these things that we can't really confirm. The only people who know whether or not this is true are the people that were there. Later on, so this is just the first couple weeks of July. It looks like they never really got their marriage license. I don't know if they get it at some point later on, as he suggested they did in his statement. But it looks like he's having a normal conversation with her. It goes on to July 11th. She says, I ordered your coffee. I love you unconditionally. I'm just afraid I'm going to lose you. He says, that's a solid fear, but you can't be selfish. And she says, I don't think I'm selfish. I feel like I've been very supportive of you exploring your sexuality. I'm not sure exactly how they found out or if he told her, but essentially he realized or came out that he was bisexual, perhaps. So about a week before Grace Holland's death, she texts, you don't love and accept you. I love and accept you. He responds, I want to be by myself. She says, you just told me you wished I was dead. How do you say that to someone you love? Someone who is mourning your baby and in tremendous pain. He responds, I am not doing anything I do not want to do, like getting married or having a baby. She responds, you can't even be nice to me. You have to hurt me over and over. It's cruel. He responds, I despise you. She says, you'll get your wish. Goodbye. He responds, goodbye. She says, I hope you love someone. I hope you love someone. I loved you someday. I didn't deserve this. All I did was love you unconditionally, and you wished me dead. As we got closer to the day that Grace would ultimately take her life, she texted Robert Daus saying, I know that you don't want me and that you don't love me. It's taken me a long time to see it, but I know in my heart that it's true. Goodbye, my love. I hope you find peace. He responds, oh, please. You were pushy from day one. I asked you to back off my kid and you didn't. You are as much to blame for this failure. But as usual, it's everyone else's fault. You can't be ignorant to my kid. Sorry it worked out this way. Both our families hate us together. I had higher hopes. She says, you and me both, kid. It's okay. We'll both find our own peace. I'll love you forever. He responds, ridiculous. She says, maybe, but this was our journey. It was never about them anyway. I hope you can live a life you aren't ashamed of. Be unapologetic. Be brave. I always thought that you were trying to hide me. Now I know why. He responds, I was hiding you? Really? She responds, I'll love you forever. I'm going to be with our babies. They need me more. Here she says, you said you wouldn't get engaged. You said we wouldn't have a baby. You said you wouldn't get the license. This is just what you do, play games. He said, I didn't want to get the license. And she said, but you did. So at some point, it does look like they did get the marriage license. And then he responds, you pushed me to do it. And she says, because you love me. He responds, no, I did it to delay your crazy. She says, because you don't want to lose me. And he says, I do want to lose you. But then why would you get the marriage license? So on July 22nd, 2020, 3:52 a.m., the text messages start off with Grace asking Robert Daus, where are you? It's a typo, but where are you? He says, go fuck yourself. She fixes her error, says, where are you? He says, I'm sleeping. She responds, how could you leave me? He says, it's only for the night. She asks, why aren't you here? But he responds, but I'm leaving you forever is next. She rolls her eyes. What is wrong with you? He responds, I want nothing to do with you. She says, lies. How could you? He says, fuck you. Now she's talking about a sexual encounter where she says, you pulled out. He says, yep. She asks, what the fuck is wrong with you? You know how much a baby means to me, to us. He says, I want nothing to do with you. She says, and you are running away because you are scared? He says, I told you how I feel. She says, it's sad and it's hard. It's so unfair, but you can't walk away. He says, if you want to deny my feelings, then go right ahead. She says, I'm hurting too, but I didn't leave you. I don't hate you. It just sucks. He says, now I have told you a second time. She says, it hurts. And he says, yes, it does. She says, if we were married, you wouldn't leave me over a miscarriage. He says, I told you that I would participate in a funeral ceremony. She says, you didn't, planned nothing. He says, I asked you to plan it and let me know. You plan it, not me. And that was the last text messages before she purportedly took her own life. So there was a lot to unpack there, a lot of hostility. Again, he continuously tells her he wants nothing to do with her. He doesn't want to get married. He doesn't want a baby. There are a few moments where he starts saying that he loves her and starts kind of acting normal, asking her if he wants to pick up food. It does look like at some point he goes through and gets the marriage license. And then he continuously tells her that he wants nothing to do with her, but she's still like holding on to him. There was a text message that he mentioned about how she recorded him and he would not trust her after that moment. I did want to go over that recording. So this video was taken on June 24th, just about a month before Grace would be found deceased.
Now, do I have to plan on you being here again tonight?
No.
Oh, but you said that last night. So now I'll make other arrangements.
What do you mean?
Well, I won't be here then.
Why not?
Because I don't want to be around you.
Why not?
I don't want to be around you, period. But if this is going to be some sort of forced fucking marriage, that doesn't mean I can strive to spend as little time with you as possible and take every little advantage to stay the fucking arm's length from you. Every little night I have to squeak an extra hour at Liberty, traffic, flat tire, whatever the fuck I can do to just extend my life away from you is going to be my priority.
I love you. I hope you have a good day,
There won't
okay?
be any trips.
Okay.
I don't want to travel with you.
Okay.
I don't see
love
the world
you.
with you.
I love
don't
you.
do anything with you.
I love you. I hope you have a good day. Okay?
Fuck yourself.
Okay.
Fuck you.
I hope you get in a better mood.
No, this is the mood
Okay.
I'm going to be in.
No, you're just trying to be mean to me, and I'm not going to take it. I love you. Have a good day.
You,
Love you. Have a good day.
then we will be selling condoms. Just so you know. So I would work on something, whether it's keeping the kids in Irondale or whatever it is you need to do. So yeah.
So that was a video that she recorded of Robert Daus. According to her story, she told, I believe it was her sister, that she was hoping to kind of capture this video to show it to him, to kind of show him the way that he treated her, which obviously hindsight is 2020. I wouldn't advise anybody to do that, because if you show somebody the way that they are, they're not going to really respond and be like, oh my God, that's me. That's so horrible. I'm going to change my ways. But instead, they're going to feel betrayed, and they're probably going to feel a little bit threatened that you have this visual proof of the person that they are when the mask falls down, not the person that they kind of portray to the public or to the rest of the world. They're not going to see this video and have this epiphany that they are being abusive or cruel or anything like that. They're going to see it as a threat, that you have this proof of who they are behind closed doors. And people like this often are not going to be happy with the idea of having their true self in this form, perhaps being shared publicly. I'm not trying to shame her. I think that for whatever reason, she was desperate for this relationship to work. But all of these red flags that he was displaying, I wish would have been enough for her to have left this relationship after all of the times that he was telling her to leave. And it's very unfortunate that she never did. And we see a lot of these similarities in his relationship with Sarah Sweeney, and we're going to get into that as well. Now, again, there are still a lot of people who question whether or not she actually pulled the trigger that day and what happened. So I wanted to go over some of the images, again, that Gavin Fish has provided on his Patreon. Again, these images are very, very disturbing, but I think it's important to understand the entire context of this relationship. So again, these are disturbing, but I do find it to be very important. So this is an image, I believe, that Grace Holland had texted to Robert Daus. In this photo, you can see that she is holding the firearm with her left hand. Again, like I keep going back and forth myself as to what happened that day. Images like this obviously make me think that she was indeed the person who pulled the trigger. She's holding her left hand. But then again, her right hand is obviously her dominant hand, so it's probably easier to hold the firearm with her left hand while she's not. I mean, here you can kind of see her thumb is on the trigger. That could absolutely have been the way that she did this to herself, right? This is a good explanation as to how that might have happened. But she's holding the phone with her right hand because it's probably easier to take a picture of what she's doing here. This image here, you can see that she's holding the firearm up to her chin. I believe this is her hand, but this is the Seroquel that Robert Daus mentioned that she was prescribed, that she never really took, but when she did take it, it seemed to have helped her. I don't know if this is her image. I don't know if she was sending these pictures to get a reaction out of Rob Daus. Now, this text message, It doesn't have a date on it, but she wrote, "Goodbye. You failed me. I love you. Tell the girls I love them. You chose this," with the firearm on the bed. And lastly, another photo of a firearm. So clearly this woman was struggling with her mental health. I don't think there is any debate about that. However, it's a question why Robert Daus, especially being a first responder, would have treated her this way, knowing how fragile her mental stability was at this point in time. All of this happened right after she had a miscarriage, which, even though you don't have a full pregnancy, you can still have a lot of the postpartum depression if you did have a full-term pregnancy and have a child. So it's very concerning that he would continuously treat her that way and continuously be cruel to her, knowing what he knew about the threats that she was making when it came to taking her own life. Which leads me to believe that there is a good possibility that he will be found liable in that wrongful death lawsuit for having contributed to her taking her own life. So another point of contention with the investigation is the way that Robert Daus was treated. There are calls and instances where it certainly seems like Robert Daus was being given special treatment, perhaps because he is the fire captain. This call here that I'm going to share with you is from Detective Parker to Robert Daus. And I'm not even really going to explain it. Let's listen to it. And I'm curious to hear what you guys think.
Hey, how's it going? Pretty good. Are you working yet, or are you still off?
I am off, but I'll be starting back next cycle.
Okay. What they want us to do is come by and look at your phone. Do you still have a text thread between you and Grace?
I do.
Okay.
I do.
What they're asking is that we come by, take a look at that, and take some pictures of it. We've got her phone, but it's a little bit difficult and expensive to download. If it would be all right, we'll come by and snap some pictures of the thread between you and her, and then that's pretty much it.
I think it's quite, yeah, I think it's quite, it goes back quite a ways.
Mm-hmm.
You know what I'm saying?
Yes.
I guess, are you guys looking for something immediate, or?
Let me.
I guess where are we driving at? I guess where I'm trying to, I guess where are they driving at with the
it's going to have to be sort of relevant to, recent events. So,
like are arguing about having a baby or not having a baby?
That would be, certainly relevant. To show her mindset and what was, what was going on in her mind.
Pretty much. Yeah. Well, she didn't. I can tell you, she didn't. Threaten. Well, I don't know. If you went back far enough, there was times where she would, say things like, "Hey, I'm going to go be with our baby." And,
right.
That's
the kind of stuff that shows that.
But you'd have to go back. Jesus, you'd have to go back. Quite a bit.
Yeah. And we can. I don't know. How many.
It's just. I guess it's what. Is the family pushing on this, or is this relative?
It's everything. It is part of that. It's part of us just wanting to document this or that, and it's again, it also can protect you. If there's that, I'm going to go be with my baby type language. That obviously is in and of itself is, to be honest, it's suicidal. So.
Yeah,
that's the type of thing that would show that this is something that she did all on her own, and of course the family has different views and is angry and whatever. So
are they think that like I shot her?
Well,
obviously I didn't.
No.
At
this point, no, but was something that came up initially.
Right.
And that's why we want to do a very thorough job. And, again, it's to preserve the truth, and it's protection for, I can't see your phone, so I don't know what's on it. I mean,
Yeah,
but
it's us arguing.
Yeah.
I mean,
and every couple
back
does.
and forth about,
Right.
arguing about, getting married,
Mhm.
argued about moving in together or not moving in together. Like
Right.
I said, I've been pretty open about this. I was
Mhm.
1 foot in and 1 foot out of this relationship. So
Yep.
it's a lot of arguing back and forth about that kind of stuff,
Mhm.
clearly.
Yeah.
I guess I just,
Yeah.
I can coordinate a time to kind of do it. I guess I'm just trying to figure out how far, back. I guess I'm just a little
Mhm.
caught off guard because I'm just kind of like,
Well, I understand that, because I'm sure there's going to be some things on there that I get that too.
I'm just kind of curious what the family is driving at with this point.
Well,
of like
they're
what
they're a difficult family. I mean, that's, I think, and where this may end up, I'm not sure that they're going to be satisfied with, the idea that it is, who knows? I don't know where they're going to push it or what the story's going to be, but,
strange. That's just very.
Mhm.
So I'm not going to go through this entire video, but you can see here that's not typical behavior for the police to basically give somebody the heads up saying like, hey, by the way, can we come look at your phone? It's just very bizarre to me. And it certainly plays into the notion that Robert Daus was never treated like a suspect and that he was perhaps kind of given some favoritism by the police officers. As far as I know, Robert Daus lawyered up and only gave a specific amount of text messages, probably the ones that didn't make him look so bad and perhaps made him, would have given any type of reason to make him look guilty of committing any crimes. So that is interesting. That does add another dimension to this case. And which is why, again, like I said, I go back and forth so much. Like all of her accounts of saying that she's suicidal, saying that she wants to go with her babies, the photos obviously are very damning. The text messages that she says, I'm going to go off with our baby, things like that are very damning and make it look like she absolutely was the one to pull the trigger. However, the fact that his accounts don't line up, he gave 2 different stories as to what happened. He obviously doesn't want certain messages to come out. The fact that they gave him the heads up, just these little things here and there certainly bring questions into this investigation. And again, back to the ring. So this was believed to have been Grace Holland's engagement ring, her $20,000 engagement ring. This was a photograph taken by the police department when they arrived to the scene. So it was there. However, when they went to go collect the evidence, the ring was gone. Now, that's something that the Holland family did bring up in their lawsuit, which we will go over later. But there was the interview with Robert Daus asking about this missing jewelry. So let's go ahead and go over that.
Again, really do appreciate you guys all coming up
I'm
together.
sorry, it's just taken a while. It's been a crazy few months. Sorry about that.
Quite all right.
So I'm going to go over, I don't want to go through this whole interview because it's a half
I took them
hour.
back. The engagement ring, and I put that in the tote that had her purse and the kids' like birth certificates and stuff that she had. I kind of put that all together because I thought that was important. The engagement ring and the band, those were thrown back at me up at the fire station. I took them back. There was a guy that was there that witnessed that go down. I did take them back. And then after her death, I went to the ring box afterwards, and there were no rings in there.
What's the approximate time period we're talking about between her throwing these rings at you at the firehouse and then the last time you saw him prior to her, or at, at the time of her death?
Maybe a couple months.
Couple months?
Yeah. It was within that year. The week before Grace passed, she moved out, and Graham moved her out. I came home, house was clear. And when I talked to her, because we were still talking and texting and stuff, when I talked to her and her dad moved everything out. And when I started going and packing things up to move, I'm like, oh shit, that's missing.
Do you remember like how many days after her death that would have been when you noticed that? Was that just like that day, the next day, weeks later, or anything?
It probably would have been maybe about a week later or so, because it took me a while to kind of get back, because they had to cut the flooring out and do some things like that because of the blood and everything. So it took me a while to get back.
So is this the engagement ring? I know it's a side angle, but is that the engagement ring that you had bought for Grace?
I don't know. I couldn't tell you if that is or is not. We had two sets of rings. She had the diamond ring that was real, and then she had a dummy set that she would wear.
Cubic zirconia type, fake?
Yeah, fake. Yeah, just to wear, like if we were traveling, she wouldn't wear the ring. She would wear the fake ring. So I don't know if that's the real one or not.
Okay. Did she have was the fake one like almost like the same model as the real one, or is it almost hard to decipher? Or were they completely different?
No, they were cathedral style. It's just like this one is. Yeah.
Okay. And the only reason I asked is because I know you said that you didn't see the ring 2 months prior to her death and beyond. But when we were over there on the day of her death, I was photographing the bedroom, and I photographed this because that looked to me to be the engagement ring that was sitting there on the dresser on the day of her death. So I was figuring it was present in the house on July 22nd of last year.
So in this interview, the investigator is asking him about specifically this ring. Like there's other little things here and there, but that ring is $20,000. And it was Grace Holland's family that said that it's missing. And he's interviewing Robert Daus, asking about this ring. Robert Daus said that that months prior, Grace Holland had thrown the engagement rings at him at a firehouse. He says that someone had witnessed it there, or witnessed that had happened. He took the rings, put them back in a box, and left them there, never gave them back to Grace. And then says that after she passed, like a week or so after, he goes to where he placed them, and they were gone and had never seen them since. Then this investigator brings up a picture that I'm guessing Robert Daus had no idea that this picture existed. And he shows Robert Daus a picture of a ring sitting on a table that he took at the scene of the crime when Grace Holland allegedly shot herself, and says, is this the ring? And the way that Robert Daus kind of like perks up, like I think he was blindsided by it. And I think, in my personal opinion, he's full of it. He says that immediately he tries to come up with an explanation as to how this ring looks identical to the engagement ring that he says he had not seen for months. He says that Grace Holland and he purchased a dummy set that looks exactly like the same rings that they would wear on vacation. I don't know a single person that does that. Of course, I'm sure there are going to be people out there who say that they do something like that, but to have the ring look identical, I'm sure there should be some record of somebody making a ring that looks identical to her $20,000 engagement ring. But most people I know will either leave their rings at home, keep them locked up in a safe, or perhaps when they are at the hotel, they'll keep them locked up in the safe that is usually provided in hotel rooms. Just the way that he's reacting in this video, I personally don't believe what he's saying. He seems to be lying to me. And again, like the way that he kind of perked up as soon as he saw that picture, it took him a while for him to come up with an answer as to what ring that might have been. So yeah, I just think that he's full of it. Again, that doesn't mean that he's guilty of pulling the trigger of on Grace Holland, but I do think that he's full of it. Okay, so here we have the wrongful death lawsuit filed by the Holland family. Christopher Kunn is Grace Holland's ex-husband that she had her 4 daughters with. These are the initials of her 4 daughters against Robert Daus. They petitioned for damages. 1, on July 22nd, 2020, Grace Holland died of a gunshot wound to the head. 2, the only living person who knows exactly what happened that night is defendant Robert Daus Jr. 3, one of 2 things occurred that night. Either Robert Daus shot Grace Holland or Grace Holland took her life after years of being subjected to physical and mental abuse by Robert Daus. Either way, Robert Daus Jr. is liable for the wrongful death of Grace Holland. Goes over the facts. Prior to her death, Grace had been in a relationship with Daus for 4 years and had been engaged to him for 2 years. Their relationship was marred by psychological and physical abuse. Daus pressured Holland to quit her job for a company owned by Daus's family. Instead of paying Grace directly, the company paid Daus, who controlled the money. By controlling the money, Daus controlled Grace. Daus and Grace lived together at 623 Fairway Circle in Creve Coeur. Daus and Grace picked out a new house together at 11880 Conway, where Daus now resides. Even though they planned to move there together, Daus did not put Grace's name on the deed to the house. Nevertheless, Grace spent months renovating the house to prepare it for Daus and Grace to move into. On July 9th, 2020, Grace recorded a video that starts with Daus talking to her about making problems with me. Grace responds, "You don't want me to die, so don't say that." Daus responded, "I just wish you would go away, but I realize that's not going to happen." In June 2020, Grace reported that Daus pushed, shoved, and dragged her down the hall, pulling her clothes off. After this incident, Grace's mother saw bruises on her arms, thighs, and spine. Grace took photographs of these bruises. Later in June 2020, Grace called her mother during an episode where Daus was yelling at her and throwing her things in the yard. Patricia Holland urged Grace to call the police and then overheard Daus say, quote, "My brothers in blue are not going to do anything to me. I've already taken care of that. You're the crazy girlfriend, remember?" Patricia Holland urged her daughter to leave the house, but Grace responded that she could not leave the house while Daus was in that state. Grace's children reported to Patricia Holland that Daus was shoving Grace and always yelling at her. Daus scared the children by throwing the phones across the dinner table while they sat there. Her children reported other times when Daus lost his temper over minor issues, such as the couch touching the curtain in the living room and silverware being out of place. In one conversation captured on video, Daus went on a rant about being in a forced fucking marriage and discussed how he would do anything to spend as little time with you as possible. 26. Grace responded by calmly telling Daus she loved him. Daus responded by saying, "Fuck you, fuck yourself, fuck you, fuck you, fuck your cunt mother, get the fuck out of my house." That's the video that we had just went over. Now, this obviously goes through the text exchanges where we went over those pretty extensively, probably more extensively than necessary. But on July 20th, 2020, Daus turned again, stating that "I want you out of my life, and you did nothing but ruin my first night staying at Conway." He then stated, "The thought of you sleeping in that house makes me want to vomit. That's how much I hate you." And 2 days later, Grace was dead. The text exchanges show that Daus was erratic, wildly swinging from calmly discussing house furnishings to unleashing a string of hateful epithets at Grace. Suspicious death. Little is known about the hours before her death. What is known raises serious doubt regarding the suicide narrative adopted by Daus. On the evening of July 21st, 2020, at approximately 10 p.m., Grace took selfies of herself and Daus in bed at the Conway house. Grace is smiling in the photographs. Approximately 7 hours later, Grace was dead at the Fairways house. Daus has never given any explanation regarding what happened at the night of Grace's death, much less explained how Grace went from being in bed at the Conway house to dead at the Fairways house 7 hours later. The gunshot wound to her left temple. Grace is right-handed. When she is trained using firearms, she only used her right hand. A self-inflicted gunshot wound to the left temple is inconsistent with being right-handed. A gunshot wound to the left temple is consistent with someone standing opposite her shooting with his right hand. Now, again, we went over those pictures where she's clearly holding the firearm with her left hand, so that could put some doubt into whether or not he had anything to do with pulling the trigger that night. After her death, Daus gave statements regarding the circumstances of her death that are either contradictory or demonstrably untrue. This is kind of the things that we went over, whereas Holland came into the living room to give Robert a hug. She went back into the bedroom without speaking to him, and then Robert heard a gunshot. The other story saying that that Grace Holland went into the closet with him, pulled him close, had their cheeks touching each other, and then that's when she did that. Either way, they're definitely contradictory. 2021, Creve Coeur police interviewed Daus about Grace's missing engagement ring that was worth $20,000, along with other expensive jewelry that went missing after her death. During the interview, Daus claimed that Grace gave the ring back to him. Text messages between Daus and Grace indicate that Daus subsequently gave the ring back to Grace, which we did see in those text messages. He did say, "I gave you the ring." He said that. During the, you know what they didn't say though? They never mentioned anything about this dummy set that he suggests that they had. During the interview, Daus also fabricated a narrative that Grace, along with her father, moved out of the house a week before her death, taking most of her belongings. This simply did not happen. Again, there's no way to really verify this. It's really Daus's word against Grace Holland's family. So it's hard to know whether or not this is true, being that they have pictures of Grace being with him at the Conway house the day before she died, and then at the Fairway Circle house the morning of, certainly raises a lot of questions. So that was just a quick bit of the wrongful death lawsuit that has been filed by the Holland family against Robert Daus. This was filed on July 21st, 2023, just about 6 months before the death of Sarah Sweeney. Let's go ahead and get into that one. This one, there's the relationship between Robert Daus and Sarah Sweeney. While it does seem like they had some issues of their own, we don't have all of the same evidence. There are a couple of text messages that she wrote, but there's not too much information out there in regards to their relationship. But I do want to go over that really quickly. So the Daily Mail did a great article kind of covering all of the bases when it comes to the case with Dr. Sarah Sweeney. So we'll just go ahead and go over this. Headline reads, again, these are some of the headlines that I spoke about at the very beginning that initially caught my attention and that really got me interested in this case. Dr. Sarah Sweeney feared fire captain fiance Robert Daus and referred to him as a murderer in chilling email to a friend 2 years before she was found dead in his house. Robert Daus's fiance, Dr. Sarah Sweeney, 39, was found dead in his home in suburban St. Louis earlier this month. DailyMail.com can reveal that Sweeney told a friend that she lived in fear of Daus and described him as my boyfriend, the murderer, according to court filings. In 2020, Daus's then fiance, Grace Holland, died from a single gunshot wound in his home, and it was ruled a suicide. So this was written on January 30th. This was just about a couple of weeks after, I'm sorry, all of these things are moving around. This was written just a couple of weeks after Sarah Sweeney had passed away. The Missouri doctor found dead in the home she shared with her fire captain fiance told her friend that living with him was often scary and referred to him as a murderer, DailyMail.com can reveal. Sarah Sweeney, 39, is the second woman to have died when living with and engaged to Robert Daus Jr., 50. Her death has been classified as sudden by police in the St. Louis suburb of Frontenac, depending a medical examiner's findings. Now, federal court filings reviewed by DailyMail.com have revealed that Sweeney lived in fear of Daus and described him as suspected of murdering a previous girlfriend. The woman in question was his fiancée, Grace Holland, 35, who was engaged to Daus when she died from a gunshot wound to the head on July 22nd, 2020, in a death that was ruled a suicide. Holland's family have fought the findings of sudden death and brought a wrongful death lawsuit in which they allege Daus is liable for Holland's death and that he was psychologically and physically abusive. So here on the left, we have Sarah Sweeney. Robert Daus is here on the right. This is a huge text message between Sarah Sweeney and her coworker. I'm going to get into that in just a bit. This is the home, the Conway house that Robert Daus had picked out with Grace Holland, the house that they were supposed to move into with their family. However, even though he mentioned that he was going to sell the Conway house because he couldn't afford it, he then gets with Dr. Sarah Sweeney pretty soon after Grace Holland had passed away. But they moved into this home together. Podiatrist Sweeney's claims surfaced in court filings that are part of a suit she brought against her former employer's Best Foot Forward and its founder, Dr. Franklin Harry, in November 2022. In it, Sweeney, who left BFF to set up her own practice, alleges that she was subjected to gender discrimination, disability discrimination, and sexual harassment, as well as health insurance violations and lack of compensation for work done. BFF and Harry promptly filed a counterclaim in which Sweeney's mental and physical health during the relevant time period were presented as key issues. Lawyers for BFF wanted to subpoena several people, including Daus himself, and a friend and colleague of Sweeney's, Danielle Mancunas, who I believe this is the text message between the two of them, in whom Sweeney allegedly confided details of her personal life. Lawyers for Sweeney pushed back at these subpoenas, prompting BFF attorney Mark Murphy to file a memorandum in support of his request, to which several exhibits were attached. Among them is a lengthy email from Sweeney to her friend Mancunas, in which she begs her friend to do the right thing in your heart and support her, even if it meant going up against her employer. She wrote, "I'll likely lose and be embarrassed by him," meaning Harry, "and my lawyer will be embarrassed for me because this paints the picture that I am lying about everything. And it's because you don't want to lose your job affected, which I understand. But guess what, Danielle? I've been homeless. I have had to move in with my boyfriend, the murderer, which has been scary at times. I've lost every penny and closed out my savings. I have had issues getting a job because of my past affiliation with him. I have suffered. I have been through the ringer." BFF attorney Murphy explained the relevancy of seeking all text communications between Mancunas and Sweeney relating to her relationship, as well as email communications, stating, "Sweeney's health, both physical and mental, are key issues in this case. As such, any communications that bear on Sweeney's physical or mental health are directly relevant." He added, "For example, during Sweeney's employment with BFF, she was in a relationship with a person upon whom BFF and Harry had been attempting to serve with a subpoena, Rob Daus, who was, according to Sweeney, abusive and was suspected of murdering a previous girlfriend. I can't get my car inspected. I lost my car insurance and I can't get it registered in Missouri because it won't pass inspection with a broken windshield and headlight out." Talking about Harry, she ended the email with the words, "He will win. I'll be the crazy one." Sweeney's desperate situation is an chilling echo of the controlled and powerless situation in which Holly's family claim she found herself during her 4-year relationship with Daus. Daus has never been charged in connection with Holland's death, which was ruled a suicide by the medical examiner, despite several key factors her family say contradict this finding. They point out that Holland was right-handed and, as a woman trained to use firearms, had always shot with her dominant hand. Yet she was shot in the left temple, a fact described by her family as inconsistent with a self-inflicted wound and consistent with standing someone opposite and shooting her. Another text message I found that was purportedly written by Sarah Sweeney on February 16th, 2022. She writes, "I know I can't. You're so right. He called me Grace the other day. That is the dead fiance. I'm applying for non-doctor jobs, stuff in research and health sciences. I can't go anywhere right now because of finances. I can't do anything until I land a job. I will have one ASAP, even if it's being a waitress. Now, again, this is in 2022. This is still when the COVID hysteria is kind of taking place, where a lot of people lost their jobs or are having a hard time finding jobs, things like that. It wreaked havoc on a lot of people's financial situations. But I do find the parallels between the situation that Grace had found herself in, being with Robert Daus, and the situation that Grace Holland was in, where her family alleges that he essentially had her work for his company, but he was being paid for the work that she had done. Now, in those text messages, this is where I find some issues with this, is that it seems as if he continuously told her to get a job, that he had to do everything on his own, that his finances were overwhelming him. But then you look at the situation with Sarah Sweeney, and it seems as if she was in a similar situation where she was having a hard time with her financial situation, and she felt almost pressured to live with Robert Daus, even though she didn't want to, because she had no other options. I find that very interesting. Again, it might not mean anything. It could just be a massive coincidence, and Robert Daus is the most unlucky person in the world, but it certainly seems that there's something else lying beneath the surface. Okay, so let's go ahead and get into Sarah Sweeney's autopsy. The official report released by Frontenac PD says, quote, Dr. Sarah Sweeney was found deceased inside her Village of Westwood residence in the early morning of January 13th, 2024. Dr. Sweeney was found with no obvious signs of trauma discovered on her body, and our investigation at this point supports that she was home alone leading up to her death. The St. Louis County Medical Examiner's Office conducted a postmortem examination and toxicology analysis relative to the death investigation of Dr. Sweeney and concluded her immediate cause of death was oxycodone, gabapentin, and diphenhydramine intoxication. The manner of death is undetermined. Investigators are continuing to gather information. Therefore, this case remains an active investigation. The full autopsy report, however, has not yet been released. Quote, our family has complete confidence in the thorough investigation made by the St. Louis County Medical Examiner's Office and the Frontenac Police Department, read a statement from the Sweeney family. We'd like to thank them for their hard work on this case and for their kindness and compassion when communicating with us. There is still an ongoing police investigation, so we kindly ask that you continue to respect our privacy. We have no further comments to make. Our hope is to close this chapter of our lives soon so that we can grieve, move on, and continue to honor the memory of our Sarah. Days after Sweeney's death, her attorney told First Alert 4 Investigates that she absolutely had a life-threatening condition. Court records indicate that she had a bone disorder and mast cell activation disorder. The home Sweeney was found dead inside belonged to a man whose fiance died of a single gunshot wound to the head 2 years prior. Creve Coeur police initially ruled Grace Holland's death a suicide, but her family remains concerned about how the investigation was handled. Through an investigation, they had called for a thorough investigation into Sweeney's death. First Alert 4 has not named the firefighter nor the department for which he works, given that he has not been charged or arrested on suspicion of any crime. Frontenac police, who have been conducting the investigation into Sweeney's death, did not immediately respond to requests for additional information. But like I said at the top of this video, this case has left my head spinning. On one side of the aisle, I can absolutely see how Grace Holland could have taken her own life. She was obviously suffering and struggling with her mental health. She was in a very dark place. She was struggling with the loss of her baby. She was in this abusive relationship, this very toxic, volatile relationship. But then on the other hand, Robert Daus clearly wanted to get rid of her. It could have been his way out of this relationship. He provided two different stories that contradicted each other. The missing jewelry that, in my personal opinion, he's clearly lying about. The medical examiner's report, the fact that she used her left hand, And then they said that the wound was on the right side, but then we find it was on the left side. And the handgun was found by her right side and by her right hand, and her arms were on her chest. All of these things just don't line up to what a typical suicide scene might look like. And then we have the death of Dr. Sarah Sweeney, a woman who was suffering from a medical condition. However, she seemed to have had it under control up until this point. So the timing seems very off. It seems very peculiar that her death happened right as Robert Daus was going to be deposed or he was going to be subpoenaed. It just, everything about this case just raises so many questions for me. There are so many red flags, but I don't know. I still don't know. At the end of the day, I hope the families of Grace Holland and the families of Dr. Sarah Sweeney can grieve peacefully, and hopefully they get all of the answers that they are looking for, and hopefully they get the justice that they deserve. But I'm dying to hear what you guys think about this case. Have you ever heard of this case before? It's a wild one. It's wild. So let me know what you guys think in the comment section down below. Before you go, make sure you like the video, hit the subscribe button, share it if you find it worth sharing. Other than that, I will see you guys in the next one.